As was mentioned by the minister, for various reasons, a lot of them just historical, Ecuador is in the gap here. There have been just a lack of deposits, and also, as Nick said, the area is covered in dense jungle for the most part, and it's just not as easy to explore as other places like Chile, but it has an incredible amount of opportunity. A lot of these projects have been talked about. These are major projects within the country. SolGold you heard about earlier. Our project is sitting over here. The reason I put this up, I wanted to show really that to a large extent we believe that Ecuador has now been de-risked. There are major companies like BHP. BHP has opened an office there. As the minister said, Anglo American is now in the country, Newcrest is there, and there are a lot of projects going on and a lot of results coming out, not just from SolGold, but from the other players there as well. This is where we're sitting, under the pink star here, in the Cordillera de Curucu. The Cordillera del Condor, which is heavily explored, is down here. Fruta del Norte lies down in here. This is our property up here in the Cordillera de Curucu. Now, it's kind of a no-brainer. You look at this thing, and here's the trend, coming right through like that. This is heavily explored down in here. The Santiago River is here, and the area to the north is virtually unexplored. So, with my experience with Aurania, and also working in the area really since 2001, I was aware, and so also Richard, that the gold deposits that have been found here in the south have been associated with Jurassic volcanics. This is the purple and the blue, and so when the area opened up after a hiatus of 7 years, there was a 7-year moratorium in place when people couldn't get ground. On the date that it opened up, I was busy assembling this land package. So it's a contiguous land package. There are no holes in it, and it covers the whole of the productive volcanics in this area here. So lots and lots of goodies down here. A couple of things I want to point out, because I'm going to mention them later on. Macas up here, which is really the closest town to our area. So there's an airport in Macas, and that's kind of the hub for us. Those in the front can make this out, but it says the Rio Upano, U-P-A-N-O. That's a river that runs down the west side of the Cordillera. I'll be talking about them later. And also Nambija down here. Nambija is an artisanal mining area, very, very famous in Ecuador. Of course, you've heard about a lot of these other things, major deposits, Fruta del Norte, which is in pre-production right now, as well as Mirador. You heard about them from both the minister and we'll just carry on. So our exploration approach is really a layered approach. It started out with a historical record. From that to satellite interpretation, geophysics, and stream sediment sampling, and I'll explain all these in turn. So Nambija really comes from the historical record down here, and then geophysics and other things were responsible for the discoveries of these other bodies. A catalyst going forward, what's going to drive our news. The historical record, of course, we're still doing work on that and developing new stuff. Let's see. Satellite interpretation, that was carried out several months ago. I'll talk about that. Geophysics and the stream sediments. I don't expect everyone to read this, so I'm just going to tell the story. So, my time in Ecuador started back in 1998, and it's kind of a funny story, but it's absolutely true. I was living in Venezuela. I was living in Caracas. The election was coming up, and Chavez was running. And my lawyer told me, he said, clear out of here, because if Chavez is elected, there'll be a coup by the army. They don't like him, they'll get rid of him, and they'll be shooting in the streets and all the rest of it. So he was advising all of his international clients just to go. Get out of there for a month and then come back after the situation had cooled down. So I thought about, well, where am I going to go? And a couple of things I had a couple of ideas. I decided to go to Quito and enroll myself in a Spanish school and improve my Spanish, because I'd been living in Venezuela, and I'd been working down in the diamond mines, and it came to my knowledge actually in a very embarrassing way that most of my vocabulary consisted of swear words, which I'd learned from the miners. So I had to get away from that for sure. And I went to Ecuador, and I got picked up at the Quito airport, and they said, you're going to go live with an Ecuadorian family, and they've been given strict instructions. If you talk to them in English, they're not going to answer you. You have to speak only in Spanish. You're supposed to be in Spanish immersion. I said, okay, that's fine. And then the first night while I was there, the family was headed up by a professor of history, Octavio Latorre, and he said to me, I went to Boston College for my PhD, and I'm losing my English, and so I'm going to make a deal with you. We'll speak Spanish until 8 o'clock at night, and then only English. And every evening he would bring out 2-quart bottles of beer and sit them on the table, and we'd start talking sometimes far into the night about philosophy and history and geography and our various exploits all over the world. Very, very interesting gentleman. Now, the thing was, he was interested in me because I'm a geologist, a career geologist, and he had actually worked for the mines department. Very strange thing for an historian. Why would he do that? Well, there was an area called Nambija, which I pointed out in the previous slide, which had been a mine of the Spanish conquistadors. It was established around 1562. It was abandoned in 1603 after a smallpox epidemic had killed all the labor force. They were using indigenous people as forced labor. They were all gone, so they just walked away from it. It ended up reclaimed by the jungle, and it was found in 1981, no joke, 1981, by 2 boys hunting wild pigs back in the forest. They found this thing. They told their father, a bunch of tunnels back on the side of the hill. He came and investigated. Within 1 month, there were 25,000 miners there, mining high grade. On the record, it produced 2.7 million ounces of gold. That's on the record. Most of it went under the table. It was probably about 5 million ounces produced. It was high grade. And when this happened, the government was certainly aware that there were other places in Ecuador. The professor said to me one night, he said, you know, Keith, there were 7 famous places in what was called the Audiencia de Quito, which has now become the country of Ecuador, that were famous mines. One of them, Zaruma, was never lost. The other 6, over time, have gradually been found again and again and again over the centuries and reestablished, but 2 of them are still lost. And one of them is called Logroño de las Caballeros. The other one is called Sevilla de Oro. And these places were regarded to be the richest places in the Spanish Empire. And I'm not just saying this. This is what we read in the various documentation. So he said, I said, do you have an idea where they are? And he said, yeah, I've been doing research for years and years on this stuff, and I've got maps and documents and tons of stuff. So we decided that we were going to get together and do some exploration. Of course, Aurelian happened kind of in the way, and everything took a left turn. And so I went and did that, and of course Fruta del Norte was found. Very sadly, the professor left us just a month ago. He passed away on the 3rd of September at the age of 87. So he didn't live to see the results of this exploration that we're carrying through. So really we're following on with his legacy and completing the work that we started way back in 1998. So here he is on a trip we made to Rome when we went to the Vatican. This is one of his books. Here's his name up here. He was the foremost authority in the world on the maps of the age of the Spanish conquistadors and on the history and the expeditions and things like that. And he wrote here, it says, the expedición a la canela y el descubrimiento del Amazonas. It means the expedition looking for cinnamon, which was very, very valuable at the time, and discovery of the Amazon. And you see the Amazon's put in here very, very fancifully, and there's terra incognita. I always love to see terra incognita on a map, because that means there's nobody been there before. But this is one of his things, and he showed me this map. He had a black and white reproduction. I've actually got an original sitting on the wall of my office. It's from 1584, and it was in the very, very first atlas that was ever published in the world. It was published by a chap by the name of Abraham Ortelius in Flanders in 1584, and it's labeled Peruviae Auriferae Regionis Typus, the gold areas of Peru, and it shows Logroño here and Sevilla de Oro here. Now this is at a time when we didn't have an accurate way of calculating longitude. It was done by dead reckoning. Latitude we could do with a sextant. So the north-south is pretty good. The east-west is not great. This area is all BS. It's all made up. But, you know, the places that we know of through here, Quito is still in the same place, Zamora is still in the same place. The relationship between all the places is pretty good, even though the ultimate accuracy, I mean, these guys didn't have a GPS. So Sevilla de Oro was founded around 1575, and all these places were destroyed repeatedly, rebuilt repeatedly. You read in the documents, and you know, there was one time when the king asked, why are you bothering to rebuild this place, meaning Logroño, and he said, because it's so incredibly rich. And so after 1605, we don't find any mentions of these places in the documents anymore. After about 1630, they vanish altogether off the maps. The Spanish crown tried many times to recover these areas, and really after about 1616, they gave up. So, and there was a concerted Indian attack around 1605 that definitively destroyed Logroño for the very last place. Logroño was reputed to be a lot richer than Sevilla de Oro. So I've been getting a lot of coverage in the press over this. This is an article out of the Northern Miner, and I'm actually looking at an excerpt out of the diary of Christopher Columbus here. Here's the professor. The retail people really like this story, and why wouldn't you? I mean, you know, it's kind of funny. I've been approached by 2 companies now that wanted to film reality TV around this, and of course I'm not going to do it. But one of them does Gold Rush Alaska, and they said, you know, we've got 5 million viewers of Gold Rush a week, and it's made $150 million for Discovery Channel, and that just shows how popular these kinds of stories are with the people on the street. So I think when our story starts to catch fire, it really will get some traction with the retail. This is what Nambiha looked like in 1993. It was a shanty town, you know, open sewers running through the streets and everything else. And this is what the government wanted to prevent. So they hired the professor in 1982, 83, to go through all the archives in Ecuador and look for other mentions of lost gold mining settlements. And he found really hundreds and hundreds of documents. And when I met him in 1998, of course, he was very fired up about this. But the work was funded for 2 years by the government, and then the government changed, the new government pulled the plug, and they didn't sustain the exploration. He can continue to do it on his own nickel, and that's where I came into the game. So we went to one of the main places we did our work. Of course, after Aurania happened and I had a bit of money in my pocket, I could finance the thing so that we could take it worldwide, which is exactly what we did. So we ended up hiring 2 archivists working here in the Archivo General de Indias in Seville in Spain. This is the major repository in Spain for all of the archives of the New World. And it is an incredibly cavernous place. It's on 2 floors. It's sitting right next to the cathedral in Seville, which was the old capital. These walls are lined with file boxes. And the file boxes have got, there are 40,000 file boxes. They contain 80 million pages of documents. all related to the New World. Everything from the time of Columbus right up until independence. And there are people in here every day who are they're researching their family histories, they're researching shipwrecks, all kinds of fun stuff. It is a major repository for history. It's a World UNESCO site and a World Heritage site. I don't know why I showed that twice, but anyway, I just happen to have, I'm probably the only person in the room here with a library card for the Vatican, the Biblioteca Apostolica Vaticana, and I've done 2 trips to the Vatican doing research, one with a professor and one by myself. And the last time I was there, specifically, I wanted to find this book. Now, this book is written, it's called The Compendium and Description of the West Indies. It was written in 1628 and 1629 by a chap who was a Carmelite priest. His name was Vasquez de Espinosa, and he lived in Central America, the Caribbean, and South America. And he traveled the length and breadth of the countries. He wrote a book that's over 1,000 pages long. It is one of the great works in history. It's a fantastic thing. It has been transcribed and translated by the Smithsonian Institution. This is actually, it's in the collection called the Barberini Collection, and this is the emblem of the Barberinis. The Barberinis are like the Medicis in Florence, except the Barberinis were in Rome, very, very wealthy family, and one of the Barberinis became Pope Urban II, and his library ended up in the Vatican. So this is in his library, in his personal library, and I just had to go and see this, and I wanted to go and check it for accuracy. Now, I said before to remember the name Macas, and it says up here, Capítulo de la Ciudad de Sevilla de Oro en la provincia de Macas. So, you know, we're in the right area. It's just serendipity in many, many ways that the property that we have in Aurania is only 90 kilometers to the north of Fruta del Norte, where I was working back from 2001 right up until 2008. It's just in the same belt. And the reason it's there is because the belt, we believe, is full of goodies, all kinds of great stuff. Now, it says here, the first part of here is talking about how to get to Sevilla de Oro from the town of Riobamba. Riobamba is not moved, it's still in the same place. Later on, it talks about the rio called Llama Opano. It's now called the Upano, and I pointed that out. So it's cross the other side of the Upano River. It talks about the destruction of Logroño de los Caballeros here. But the most important thing for me is this section here. It says, La tierra más rica de oro que hay en todas las Indias. The earth is richer in gold than all of the Indies. And this is a refrain that we see again and again in the documentation. I don't have a lot of copies. Of course, I could spend all day showing you transcriptions, but it's just fantastic when you hold a document in your hands that's over 300 years old and it's speaking right to you. Anyway, we'll move on. As I said, our exploration program is layered. First of all, what we did before we ever got into the field was take space shuttle data and Landsat data and look for these things called pull-apart basins. Now, pull-apart basin is very easy to conceptualize. It's an area where 2 faults are and they're moving in opposite directions and there's a depression in between. The most famous example today would be the Dead Sea, which is well below sea level in Israel. So that's a profound depression. But these things have been happening all over geological time, and quite often there are areas where there's going to be high-level intrusion of porphyries, of dikes and sills and things that are hot rocks, and forming geothermal systems which are going to deposit the gold. So we've already recognized in our data 5 of these things. And we also had the same chap who did the work, the analysis, look at Fruta del Norte, and he could see the one that's there. He did that in a blind manner. So we believe the thing works. Magnetics, as Nick said to you on the Soul Gold presentation, the porphyries in this part of the world are very often containing a lot of magnetite. They're highly oxidized, and so they will show up on magnetic surveys. And this is me back in my younger days at Aurania, and behind me I've got a map showing two great big blobs here. One of them is called the Camp Porphyry, one called the Trancaloma Porphyry, and those were discoveries that we made through ground surveying. And but now we're certainly advancing things a lot faster because we're flying the entire land position with a helicopter and doing an airborne survey. So speeding up the situation very, very much so. We're also doing stream sediments. Now the stream sediments are what we're doing. It's a very simple-minded approach. We are collecting silt-sized material. It's only 0.177 millimeters in size, 0.177. It's clay, very, very fine. And clay, when it's that small, has electrical properties. And if there are any dissolved metal ions in the water here, then they're going to be picked up on that clay and concentrated. And we can take the size, that clay fraction, and have it analyzed in the lab, and then graph it all up. And if there's metal that's washing into the stream upstream, we're going to pick it up. When we did this in the old days with Aurania, and this is one of my slides from the Aurania days, we found, we took 9,000 samples. Now, it took us a long time from 2003 to 2005, largely because we never had any money. So it's a different situation now because our exploration is much better funded. But we identified 32 gold targets and 20 copper targets. So the technique works very, very well. It is very sensitive. This is another one from the Aurania days, and you know, you could take a 10-year-old child and tell him, okay, where do you think the ore deposits are going to be on here? So this is gold and minus 80 mesh. This is the size fraction we're talking about. And it's pretty obvious that there's something at the head of this drainage. There's something right here. There's something over here. Something over here. Fruta del Norte is sitting right in here. But you know, those Lundin guys got a great deal because they've got an incredible, not just the Fruta del Norte thing, but an entire district. And that's what we're aiming to get as well, up to the north. So the technique is very sensitive and it works very, very well. This is the helicopter that we're using right now. It's been flying today. This is what they call the Stinger out in front. It's a sensor for the magnetometer. This is a shot of our community responsibility team. Monica Espina, who's heading it up, is right here, and she's with two members of the indigenous community. Similar to Nick's company, we are predominantly Ecuadorian company down in Ecuador. And unlike the situation that maintained itself back in the early 2000s, when all the geologists who were graduating from Ecuadorian universities were working for the oil patch, now they're almost all working for mining companies. So we're able to pick up a lot of great, great people. Our capital structure is very tight, 27.3 million shares out, fully diluted 31.2. I own 52% of the company. That's certainly by design. I take no salary. I'm completely aligned with the investors. And the reason why I got such a big chunk is because I expect this to make me a lot of money. I expect to make a lot of money for the shareholders too. As somebody famous said, it might have been Bob Friedland, I don't know, but making money for the shareholders is the most fun you can have with your clothes on. So I'm going to intend to do that, and I just want to show as one of the very last slides, it's hard for you to read, but it doesn't matter. It says here, in the year 1619, the Pueblo of El Condor was destroyed, and that was a gold mine. This is also in the book out of the Vatican, and we found it. We found this place back in 2002 on the Aurania, and we know that it's a Spanish tunnel because you can see the chisel marks in the walls. And the indigenous people and the Inca didn't have anything that was harder than bronze. So this thing was chiseled out of the rock by the Spaniards, and it's no surprise that there's gold all around it. So unfortunately, Lundine's got that now. Our conclusion, we're in a great, great piece of real estate. I mean, forget about the whole Lost Cities thing and all the rest of it. If you just look at that, if you were to take the belt to the south, the Cordillera del Condor, and superimpose it on what our land position is now, we should come up with 20, 30, 40, 50 different mineral occurrences. And so it's underexplored by modern techniques. It's had virtually nothing on it, nothing done. A couple of petroleum companies have looked at it from time to time. Our track record speaks for itself, both Richards with the copper porphyries and myself in epithermal gold in the country. So I'd like to think we know what we're doing. We've already cut our teeth. This is nothing new to us. And the news flow, so we'll have we just made a press release today. The airborne survey is 70% done now. It should be finished by the end of the month. And the stream sediment work has already started. We have 2 groups in the field right now taking samples. And our goal is to have hard targets to drill by the middle of next year.